All right. Hello, and everybody. Welcome to our monthly Cannabis Lab national program, our monthly webcast. This one is all about banking. Banking is a very hot topic in the cannabis industry because not everybody can do it. Different ways to access it, different ways to do it. So we've got 4 experts today here that are going to tell you all about the state of cannabis banking and everything that you need to do. Probably touch on some legislature and other things as well too. Folks, if you like these series and you want to watch more, you can check those out at www.joinclab.com. Join us as a member. It only costs $50 per month, cancel anytime. But if you live in Orlando, Tampa, Fort Lauderdale, or Miami, the 3rd Thursday of every month, we do in-person events at American Social. The 4th Tuesday of every month, we do them at a local coffee shop, and we do a lot more events around Florida and around the country. Finally, you should check out our podcast series. Our latest episode with Randy Lanier will actually drop later today after this, which was a great one. So you should definitely check that out. But if you want to see any more of those, go to www.youtube.com/@thecannabis-lab, and you can check out all 220 of our episodes. So without any further ado, please welcome Michelle Escalera from Accountabis. Michelle, I will allow you to take it away.
Yeah, thank you for that intro. It is lovely moderating, so thank you again for the opportunity. And I'm super excited because we have 3 great esteemed professionals. And not only that, but they're all women. So, let's give it up. That's something huge. And I think right now, cannabis only has about 10 to 20% cannabis women-owned businesses. So I love that C-Lab has given us this platform to highlight women voices in this space. So before we go into the details with all things cannabis banking, I'm going to open up the forum and allow the speakers to introduce themselves and a little bit of what they do currently. So Rebecca, if you'd like to kind of kick that off.
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to be here and be on this webinar today with these beautiful ladies, as Michelle was saying. Go girl power, right? I'm Rebecca Baez. I am currently a business services representative with First Citizens Bank. I also currently am the hemp specialist in the Broward County area for our institution. And what I do is I help business owners with their everyday banking needs, all the way from onboarding and through nurturing the entire relationship and just helping their business grow through every stage that they go through. And of course, that includes our hemp and CBD program that we currently have. It's one of a kind. You'll hear more about it later on when we get through the meat and potatoes per se of our panel today. But we have a really great hemp and CBD program. So I've kind of been spearheading that within the Broward County area. And that's a little bit about me and what I do. I have been in the financial services industry for more than 8 years. Before joining the First Citizens Bank family, I was at a different bank that was not hemp friendly. So coming into a bank that is hemp friendly, it's been really great. And I'm really looking forward to this panel today. And hopefully taking on some questions and hearing what everyone else has to say.
Thank you for that. Megan, would you like to go on next?
Sure, thank you. Super excited to be here today. I'm Megan Budd. Yes, that is actually my real name as well. I know, perfect for the industry. I am a principal with Withum. Withum is a full service national public accounting firm, and we work with cannabis operators across the country. I personally sit up in Connecticut, so I'm a little colder than you all are today. But we work with operators from early startups and pre-application process all the way up to public companies, helping with everything from accounting, tax work, valuation, transfer pricing study, and just general consulting. So super excited to join you ladies for today and hope to chime in on some of the audit and financial side of these banking requirements.
Thank you for that, Megan. And Danielle, if you'd like to kind of introduce yourself and say what you do in the industry.
Sure. Thank you for having me today. I'm very excited to be here. This is the first one of these that I've taken part in since I've kind of moved over to cannabis. So I have been in banking for a really long time. So since 2001, I started with Chase in 2001, and I was there for about 11 years. And then at Huntington National, which is a mid-sized regional bank here in the Midwest. I actually live in Ohio. And then for 6 years at Discover. So all of that in risk, compliance, risk assessment, quality, governance, you name it, and then kind of moved over into fintech. But then within the last 6 months, starting in December, I came here to the Paybotic family of brands, and now I'm learning about cannabis banking, and I'm taking all of that experience and all of that time doing kind of traditional banking and bringing that experience to cannabis banking, which is very exciting. I think in the classic banking realm, you kind of don't really think about these types of customers needing banking as well, and how important it is for them to be able to run their businesses. And so it's very exciting for me to kind of bring that kind of traditional banking to this really kind of progressive area of banking. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you for all of you guys for joining us and being here today. If you guys can just actually unmute, because this is all for all three. Can you guys talk about the landscape of cannabis banking today?
Rebecca, go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't want to step on anybody's toes. I was like, if you'd like, I can definitely go first.
Yeah.
It's still a challenge, which is, of course, no surprise to anybody who is in this industry, right? But we are finding, more and more as time goes by, specifically for hemp and CBD and non-plant touching businesses, a lot more state and regional banks are starting to become, a little more comfortable with it and starting to kind of, dab their toes in the water per se in that area. But it is still a huge challenge because, as we all know, it's still illegal at the federal level. And as long as that is a factor in play, I think a lot of banks are still going to see cannabis as that, stay away, not really pursuing it, not really wanting to get into it. So I feel like until that changes at the federal level, it's that kind of like viewpoint is still going to be there, that hurdle to get over. But is again, the state, a lot of state banks are getting into it more now. That they see really how lucrative it can be. And of course, other banks have been leaders, such as First Citizens, us, right? Leaders in getting into that industry. So they're kind of taking point from the banks that are already in it and trying to get into it. But I think federally, it's still a huge hurdle that keeps banks from actually going, all in, within this industry. So, and I don't know if anyone else would like to add to that, but it's still a huge hurdle. Hopefully it changes in the near future. But again, I think until something is done at the federal level, that's kind of going to be, those federally chartered banks, big banks, bigger banks, right? They're going to have that viewpoint, I think. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Rebecca's absolutely right. It's come a long way in the last few years, but it's still a challenge. Up here in Connecticut, it's a new market that's just coming on board. So it's a really good example of some of the challenges that new operators are facing. Likewise, we have Massachusetts right next door, right, which is a very mature market. So we've seen some of the ups and downs, and although they've been able to establish more defined banking relationships, and they've even gotten into traditional lending from some of those banks, we're not seeing that in Connecticut because banks aren't lending to startup operations. So we keep seeing it evolve, but I think it's still, we've got a long road ahead of us to get to where a cannabis operator can, get some of the same benefits as a traditional business.
Yeah, I would agree. Like as I'm learning, it very much feels like there is still kind of this stigma attached to cannabis or cannabis, but even banking, a cannabis business. And as I talk to a lot of my friends that I've met over my career who are still in traditional banking, like still within the big banks, they're very concerned with how do you do that? Or how do you, onboard a cannabis bank, and how do you continue to make sure that you can keep them banked, right? And so I think that that's what's very interesting about being in this role, is that we're really trying to meet that customer and meet that need, right? because they want to be able to run their small business just like any other business. And there is a way to do it, right? And so we are learning from our customer as we continue to evolve and get to being able to launch this full product to say, how do we, in the most simple and basic way, give you the exact same, kind of banking rights that anyone else has? And I think part of the reason that the big banks really are not ready to tackle it yet is because any old school banker knows that account management, the more vanilla and basic it is, right, the easier it is to do and the easier it is to comply. And so for something like this that requires just a little bit more of that special love and special touch, it does require kid gloves. It does require that you be a little bit more diligent and you have a little bit heavier monitoring over it because of that fence and guidance and because of that special kind of customer. But I think that more of us get into it, the more of us come out of the regular banking and we think about how do we provide the solution for this customer. I think we'll start to see a little more folks get into it and trying to meet that customer need.
So if we could talk about maybe the first steps for those new cannabis business owners, what does onboarding look like when they do find a bank that's able to hold them to that capacity?
So they definitely need to be very open, honest, and responsive. Those are the three most important and biggest tips I would give to, and I say that to all of my, clients, even that I onboard in this industry. Those are going to be the three biggest key things. And again, unfortunately, it comes from that stigma. They have been at other banks where they're not very hemp friendly and they end up getting their businesses closed out because, they're doing edibles, gummies, whatever it may be, right? And so they kind of come to us, even though they know we're hemp friendly, they still are, a little bit on the fence and maybe don't want to disclose their entire product line or their entire business operation. And honestly, being honest, completely upfront about your entire product line, how your business operates, that is one of the most important things when onboarding a new relationship. Because even if you don't tell us now, it's going to come out at the end at some point. And if you don't tell us upfront, honestly, that just complicates the onboarding process and it makes it longer too. Because of course, we all know that even for hemp banking, the hemp friendly banks, there's still a process that these businesses have to go through. And really the best way to make it as streamlined and pain-free as possible is you have to be very open and honest and be responsive. So, if your banker is coming to you and asking you more questions about how your business is operating or a particular product line that you have, being responsive to it, because really we're just trying to understand your business and how you operate, because it's the cannabis industry as a whole is very different, right? You have your retailers, your distributors, your manufacturers. There's a lot of different product lines. So when we're coming back asking questions, we're really just trying to understand how you operate and what your business is. So being responsive to that, providing answers up front and being completely honest about what you're doing, it'll help streamline your onboarding process a lot more. Because the more familiar we become with your business model, the more comfortable we become. And then that helps the onboarding process. I can cut it down by a lot, by a couple business days even, which could mean everything to a business who's being exited, let's say from Chase or Bank of America, right? And they need to have a bank account opened yesterday so that they can keep operating. Well, having those key best practices in place is what's going to help push along that onboarding process a lot more streamlined and make it more efficient and pain-free for the business owner and even your banker and your bank. So.
Absolutely. That nature of collaboration is super important, right? Because in order to get you banked and to keep you banked, right, there does have to be that transparency going both ways, right? And that relationship building is very important to build that trust, right? That we can trust the information you're providing us so that we can hurry up and meet your banking needs, but then also we can keep you banked, right? We can continue with all of the, the regulatory requirements to make sure that you can continue to run your business the way you want to.
Yeah, and you're gonna hear me say this probably for time and again for all these answers, but having solid financial records is key. You can't show up with a shoebox full of invoices and expect to have your business be taken seriously. You need to have your accounts in order. we see it a lot where people are coming into the industry from, the legacy side, and you need to be able to support what you're coming into it with. If you've got $20,000 of cash, your bank's probably going to ask where it came from, and if you've got invoices to support it, and what information you've got behind it, and not just take a lump sum deposit. So making sure that you have that information, and exactly, you need to be open and honest with them, because like everything, it always comes out. So if you're just honest from the beginning, this is your bank, don't try to hide things. We've seen more times than not, people getting shut down on their payroll, on their bank accounts, and the mess that it causes in the aftermath is not worth it. So as long as there are companies out there that will do business with you, as long as you're upfront and honest about what your business is.
So you talked briefly about making sure that their financial statements are accurate. How do you ensure that your clients are having accurate financial statements and they're complying with accounting standards?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple different ways, right? So typically an early operator is not going to be subject to kind of some type of audit or review requirement, that their bank's not going to be asking for that from the get-go. But it's still important to make sure that you have somebody. So if you don't have somebody internally, then hire somebody, hire a cannabis accountant that understands cannabis. One, you're going to want it for your tax return, right? And to get your most advantageous tax position for your company. But two, you just want to have it solid books and records. So when you go into additional lending later on, you're going to have a good platform for this to base off of. But making sure that you're working with somebody who knows cannabis accounting is key. So many times we see operators get into the business and they love the cannabis side of the business, and they want to, open their retail store. They want to manufacture, and they're so excited about that part, and they're not comfortable with the accounting and bookkeeping side. So they, what everybody does when they're not comfortable with something, they just kind of like keep pushing it off. And then eventually it's going to come back to you. So you've got to find somebody. If you're not comfortable with it and you don't want to learn that side of the business, then hire somebody who's capable of doing that. So making sure that you're working with the right people that you trust.
To that end, can we talk about maybe security and fraud risk that businesses should be aware of when they're using virtual or digital documentation?
Yeah.
Oh,
go
please.
ahead, Danielle. No.
I was just going to kind of talk about, fraud risk, maybe kind of on the back end, and kind of the kind of dynamic thought we need to have around fraud risk as it relates to cannabis banking, right? So again, coming out of traditional banking, you kind of go, okay, well, this kind of customer profile would have this kind of fraud profile as well. And you kind of, stick them in that model, and you kind of expect that model to kick out, meaningful information about this very, basic kind of customer. But what I'm learning is that the nature of the cannabis related business in terms of fraud is very different, and it's very dynamic, right? So no two cannabis related businesses are going to be the same. And we are kind of in a very real-time way learning about, okay, well, a customer in this state that only has medicinal is going to face very different fraud risk than a customer who has a dispensary, in near Madison Square Garden or near Times Square in New York City, right? So you have to kind of be agile and be paying attention and be very mindful to understand yourself, right? So that you're not overwhelming your customer with, questions about fraud, but then also kind of helping to educate them as well, so that they can understand on their end as the business what their rights and responsibilities are to protect themselves as well against fraud risk. And I think it's just very interesting. It's nothing like what you would usually see from, in another small business, and even depending upon the footprint. So I think the most important thing I'm learning is to be flexible and to be agile, and to always be kind of paying attention, and to be willing to kind of share that information upstream back with our customer.
Rebecca, did you want to chime in on that note?
Yeah, and I think to that point, from an onboarding standpoint, so how we do it at First Citizens Bank is a lot of our onboardings for our hemp clients is virtual. So there's a DocuSign document that gets sent to them via email. And what we've seen is there's been an increase in email fraud, email hackers, if you will. So what happens a lot of the time is clients or prospects, they'll think they're getting an email from me, Rebeca Baez, the banker at First Citizens Bank, but really they're not. Really, they're getting some phishing email or a hacker email that's sending them information and asking them to call them up or email them back some sort of information. So to that end, I always say when it comes to fraud, make sure that you're utilizing all of your bank's resources. Make sure you have a relationship with your banker where you can pick up the phone and call them and say, hey, I got an email from Rebeca at firstcitizensbank.com, but they're asking me to send this. Did you send it? Do you need me to send it to you? Is it real? So that way it can help mitigate those risks a little bit, because a lot of the times you won't notice. It'll look exactly like my email address, right? But there'll just be one little thing in there. Like, for example, my name is with one C, but that email is going to have two C's. But if you just kind of look at it, oh, Rebeca Baez, that's my banker. She's asking me to send my account number to her to, do this for her, or whatever it is. And they'll just go ahead and send it without thinking twice about it, without realizing that, hey, that wasn't actually her. So picking up the phone anytime you get an email asking you to, take action, as from your banker or your bank side, picking up the phone and actually calling them and confirming with them, hey, did you send this to me? Is really important. And then also having that upfront communication with your banker so that you understand exactly what the whole process is. So if I've explained to you what the onboarding process looks like, what you're going to be receiving from me, what I need from you, if you get an email or a phone call then asking you for something that is not within those guidelines that I already described to you, or whoever your banker is, again, pick up the phone and call and confirm your original banker, whoever it is, whether you have, their business card, call them at that number. Don't ever call the phone number that was provided to you by this second person or this email. Confirm with them up front, because if it's not within if there's something off and it's not within the original guidelines that was, spoken to you about or that you were told about, then something is off. So take that as a red flag and just always pick up the phone is the best way to confirm what's really going on.
In cannabis, we hear a lot about compliance and making sure that you are listening on a federal and a state level. But what does compliance mean on a banking level?
Yeah, so bank compliance is that's my thing, but also it kind of depends, right? That's a really big question. Yeah. So on a banking level, one of the things we always ask, a compliance manager, if you say, oh, I have a question about compliance, they go, well, what is the product and who is the end user? Because both of those things are extremely important, right? Every single financial product is going to have its own set of rules. And then once you figure out who that customer is, if it's a commercial customer, or if it's a consumer, is then going to have its own set of rules. Sometimes there's overlap, sometimes there's not. And that's on the federal level. And then you're going to go, okay, so what state is in it? Right. And then you're going to pile on, as you're making this cake, what are all those state rules now we actually need to add as well? And so it can be, for something as simple as like just a basic deposit account, right? It can be kind of simple for that commercial cannabis customer, right? We know there's only a couple of regulations that are going to apply on that federal level. But then you throw in the cannabis laws and each state laws, right? And then you throw in this FinCEN guidance that we have. And so it can kind of start to get voluminous. And then as you evolve past, just regular digital banking of checking accounts or deposit accounts, it can obviously get a lot more complicated once we get into lending, into credit cards, if we ever get there. And, it can get quite voluminous and quite complicated, which is one of the reasons that I would like to see more of like the traditional bankers coming outside of the big banks and getting into cannabis banking, to kind of bring that methodology and that understanding of how complicated that kind of web of regulation can be, and offer that same kind of protection and guidance to the cannabis related businesses, because I think it's kind of fun and it's exciting and it feels like a very new and fresh industry. But when you're dealing with banking, I mean, you're dealing with people's money, and sometimes their most prized investment, if it's a small business or their first business or something like that, or for individuals who really are very emotionally invested in their growing or something that they do. I have a friend who is, what do you call it, a brew master, right? And feels very, very passionate about his brew, right? And his brand. And so I kind of liken cannabis cultivators to that, right? But we need more individuals who are practiced in compliance and in risk management to kind of come out of those banks and provide that guidance here as well.
How do you guys stay up to date when things are changing and industry trends? Like, if that's what you guys specialize in, technically, how does that mesh with your work and your clients?
Yeah, so we deal a lot on the compliance piece. We help with the reporting requirements, more so on the lending side. So when our clients get, different money from their more traditional lending institutions, which has now become more available, we're seeing a lot more reporting requirements that come into play right from the get-go. So where you wouldn't normally have this for a traditional company, I mean, there's everything from monthly reporting requirements, quarterly reporting requirements, annual reporting requirements. Whereas in the past, a traditional business might just have, you need to get an annual review by an independent CPA. Now we're seeing it on a much greater level. So we're getting pulled in a lot earlier and making sure that they're keeping with those compliant requirements. But again, it all goes back to the books and records, because if you're required to submit financials on a monthly basis within 2 weeks or 3 weeks, you need to have your stuff in order to be able to close your books on a monthly basis in that and be able to stay compliant. So we deal with folks on a compliant level much more. And we work really closely with the attorneys that are involved in those transactions to ensure that we're meeting all of those, the clients meeting all of those compliant requirements.
Yeah. Are you saying more often than not that you are also communicating to the onboarding specialists at the banks? Because you're creating that reporting, and sometimes I'm seeing, at least in this profession, a lot of business owners don't really understand their accounting, their financials, or even what a profit and loss statement is. Sometimes it's very elementary. So how is your relationship with someone like, I would say, Rebeca or Danielle?
Yeah, we haven't really gotten pulled into that level. Not to say that we can't be pulled into that level, but we do help a lot of startups with their initial pro formas, which will then, sometimes go into the banking relationship of if they get asked for that on the onboarding process, and making sure that when we do that pro forma, that they understand what that actually means, that it's not just us taking numbers and going, this is what it should look like. Making sure that they understand it, because not only do they need it for banking side, but they need it for investing side as well. If you're going to go out to funders and sit there with your pro forma and explain to somebody why they should give you $2 million, they're going to start poking holes in that pro forma, and you're going to want to understand, well, how did you come up with that number? I don't know. Megan told me it. So we need to make sure that they're educated. So I think that's something that's unique in cannabis just operations as well, from all of the different vendors that a company works with, is there's an education component. So if you're not working with somebody who's willing to spend that time with you and help you get educated in whatever service they're providing, then you might want to look for somebody else that will pay that kind of attention to you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just want to add to Megan's point, what she was speaking to. I've come across that, where you're trying to do lending for somebody in the hemp space, and you're asking for their financials. And when, my lender goes to take a look at it, they have some questions, like she said, where's this figure coming from? Can you explain it to me? And yeah, the response is, I don't know, that's what Megan put there. And so, yeah, they don't, and of course, that's not their area of expertise, right? They're not CPAs or accountants. They're just hiring someone to come in and do this for them. But they should be able to go to somebody who can explain it to them, and so that they can also understand how their business is doing also from a financial standpoint, not just here are these documents, have a good day, and end of story, but actually explain it to them. Because, when they do go to a bank and ask for financing, their bank is going to ask questions. And I mean, it is good, like if they do have a really good relationship with their CPA or accountant, I mean, we can bring them in too and have that partnership. But the business owner should as well also be educated on what those numbers mean and why it looks the way that it looks. And from support, it's really helpful at the end of the day.
And from a risk perspective, right, if a business comes to you and they have all of this documentation and you start asking kind of these really boilerplate basic questions about, okay, what do these numbers mean to you? What is your outlook? What are your goals for your business? And they're going, I don't know, right? Immediately your banking red flags are probably going off, right? And your antenna are going up and they're tingling that there's something not quite right, right? So that's kind of a weird way to kind of try to start a business financial relationship, to say you don't know about very much about your business, right? But I think it's very interesting and really important that, you know, individuals like Megan and like you as well, Michelle, that you're actually, you know, saying, hey, I can give you this service, or I can provide you this service and this product, but I can also give you the education, which is almost, you know, equally as valuable, right? Because just getting, you know, the beginning of that financial relationship is one thing, right? Getting your pro forma and getting your accounting together and your money together and your investment, and then your checking or your banking account together. But, you know, everyone wants to grow past that, right? They want to keep going and they want to stay in business. And that education is probably extremely valuable to helping them, you know, stay in business and continuing to grow and realize all of their financial business goals as well.
Yeah. What are some best practices? You know, Megan, you and I both have similar positions, but I find it very difficult to have or break through that initial and build rapport, because they do think that we're the IRS, you know, and I'm sure they think the same way with the bankers. The bankers are out to get them and they're going to call the cops, and the big bad wolf is going to come down and knock the house down.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
what are some good practices so you guys could have a productive relationship, not with just the bankers, but also your accountant?
I think it's just spending time, you know, spending time with your clients and having the discussions about business, but also just about life. Because I found, so my background, I came from working in healthcare and nonprofits and working, you know, in order to get that work, you have to go through this bidding process and you have to go to the board of directors and they've got to get 3 bids. And so it's a long process, right? But in cannabis, what's unique about it is that typically I found that, you know, you meet somebody, you have a couple conversations and they're like, I like you, I'm going to work with you. And they can make that snap decision, which is something I'm not used to, like in my previous life. So, but I found out how important that those first couple conversations are, because they want to know that you're trustworthy, that you're giving them the real information, that you're not just kind of doing a bait and switch of, I'm going to sell you something and then I'm going to disappear and you're going to work with somebody else and you're never going to see me again, that I'm just the salesperson. And so I think it's just creating that relationship through just some conversations and developing a rapport and making sure that you can see yourself working with them and they can see themselves working with you, right, Michelle? Because it goes both ways. There's definitely plenty of conversations you get into and you're like, this is not a good situation. I'm going to back my way out of this.
Yeah.
So it's got to be twofold. It's got to go both ways, and making sure that it's a productive relationship to both sides.
Well, I think we also wear a unique cap where we could say, well, you're not supposed to be doing that. This is what you have to do to take the necessary steps to make sure that you are compliant, you know?
Yeah.
So to the bankers, and how do you maintain that relationship? And if something is disclosed, how do you navigate them to a solution?
I think that's how classic compliance advisory, whether it's probably, you know, inside of a bank or, you know, maybe with a little bit of an outside customer touch, that's exactly how it should work, right? I'm your trusted person, like a therapist almost, right? You trust your therapist to know their business and to give you good advice, right? And you have to have that trust and that collaboration to go, okay, I'm taking my car to a mechanic because I trust the mechanic knows what they're doing and I'm going to do what the mechanic tells me to do. But if I don't show up with overalls and tools and things like that to fix your car, you're immediately going to go, I can't trust, I can't trust this. So it is coming prepared with, hey, I have the experience. I know all of these things. Let me educate you, right? So sometimes it's no, but, right? So that's always been one of my things. even in risk management, definitely in compliance. I know a lot of folks in the banks go, we don't want to ask compliance. They're going to tell us no. And it's, well, it's no, but, right. It's like, let's be creative and collaborative together. No, you can't do this, but you can do this and still be compliant and still meet your goals. And right, because there is going to be all of these competing priorities. And so it should be, in my opinion, hey, I have a lot of knowledge. I have a lot of information. I'm going to give you maybe a no, but I'm going to try to give you a solution with that no to kind of still help you do, what it is you need to do.
I love that point because it goes back to educating the clients so they're aware of the situation and how to handle it.
We want them to stick around, right? We want to build good relationships. We want to build brand affinity. We have all of these, different types of solutions for these cannabis businesses, right? One of the things I loved about coming here is that it's like cannabis first, right? And so we understand the need of the cannabis customer, whatever it is, right? If they need accounting, whatever it is, we're trying to find the solution, but we're trying to build trust in giving you that solution, right? And in all banking situations, you don't have the opportunity to do that, but we have that opportunity in this business because it's kind of small enough that you can say, kind of like Megan said, hey, I like you, I trust you, we had a beer, we met somewhere, I think what you have is something that I can use, and maybe vice versa. It's super, exciting to see these kinds of referrals and friendships and things that it's very interesting. You don't really always see that in classic banking and in other types of industries, that you can build that kind of trust and collaboration and partnership. So you want them to stick around. And one of the ways you do that is you build that trust.
Yeah. And I also feel like part of the stigma against bankers and not disclosing everything is because they hear of all these horror stories and bad experiences of my bank just got shut down abruptly. I don't even know what's going on. I'm still waiting for documentation to say why I was canceled to begin with. Rebeca, are you seeing that a lot? Are you seeing clients coming to you hesitant to open up because of that?
Yeah. To be honest, I wouldn't say that they're very hesitant when they get to us, because by the time they get to us, sadly, they are a little bit desperate. So they want to just get the account open. Yeah. But it is, I mean, a lot of people come to us because they're like, I don't know why, but my bank shut me down. I got a letter in the mail. They said I have 30 days to go get my money, or they're going to mail me, a check. And they have their business that they need to run. They can't afford that. They have employees they need to pay. They have sales coming in. They can't afford to let that happen. But it happens very often. But I told them the biggest thing is when you are in this industry and you're looking to open an account, whether you're a startup or you're an established business and you're looking for a bank to partner with, you need to find just that, a bank to partner with, not just have an account. Because a lot of these banks, you walk in there and you ask them, hey, I have a hemp business. I sell CBD. Are you guys okay with that? They'll say, yeah, sure, no problem. Come on over. Let me open your bank account. But are they really? No. And what happens is a lot of these businesses will fly under the radar for, 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever it may be. But until that back office catches wind of what type of business they're really in, the industry that they're in, now they're getting that letter. And they don't know why, because, everything was going great. I've had my account with them for a year. I have money coming in. I've never had anything negative coming out. But it all comes down to they are not a hemp-friendly bank. Mm-hmm. So if they're not a hemp-friendly bank, they're going to close you out. They're going to shut you down, essentially, regardless of whether that one banker that you walked up to and spoke to said, yeah, sure, no problem, maybe because they just wanted the business. If you're not doing your research up front and looking for these hemp-friendly banks, that's going to ultimately be the result. Because when you're in this industry, what you ultimately need is not just a bank where you can have your account and let it sit there, as long as you're under the radar and just go about your daily business. You need a bank that you can actually partner with. So a bank that is actually in this space, in this industry, is out there in the community, be 100% hemp friendly. And that's what it is. If you are a business owner and you're not with a hemp friendly bank, you run the risk of something like that happening to you every single day as the days go by. And that's just really how it is in this industry.
I'm very interested to understand, you mentioned hemp quite a bit. So it sounds like your clients are hemp clients. And then Danielle mentioned cannabis. So I'm interested to see how those two are different and how you guys are both similar in those roles. So what does maybe Citizens Bank does compared to Paybotic, since they are cannabis touching and you're hemp touching?
So cannabis is the umbrella, right? So not that we don't do cannabis banking, because cannabis is the big umbrella where, you know, everything fits nicely under there. Only the biggest difference for Citizens Bank is we won't do plant touching. So we won't open a bank account for plant touching businesses. But anything else that falls under that cannabis umbrella, which, you know, mostly is all the hemp and CBD retailers, manufacturers, distributors, whatever it may be, all of that, we go ahead and we partner with and we bank. It's really just the plant touching that at this point in time, we don't do under that umbrella. So.
And then on our side, we do those who, you know, we do bank those who are plant touching, but also those who are kind of like ancillary, you know, businesses that support, right, cannabis business as a whole. So it's kind of like that tier one, we touch the plant, dispensaries, cultivators, and then that other tier of, you know, maybe we make the fertilizer for the cultivators, or, you know, we do special, you know, something specific for, you know, cannabis related businesses. So we provide banking services and products for both.
Interesting. I'm wondering how the onboarding process are both different, since it sounds like it's more constrictive when we are doing plant touching clients opposed to non-plant touching clients.
Absolutely. There's a little bit more, there's more diligence involved in that underwriting process and getting that customer through and getting them to, you know, to the position where they have the opportunity to be banked and to maintain their banking status. It's a little bit more, but the interesting thing is that I kind of liken that underwriting process to almost like a mortgage, where you have someone who kind of walks you through that process until you get banked. And then you have someone who's kind of with you, right, as you maintain that banking relationship. So it is a little bit more complicated, but you know, I think we've all been pretty vocal about creating that collaboration, creating that relationship and that trust, so that you can, you know, for a cannabis business, you kind of do need a team, right? You need accountants, you need, you know, bankers, you need someone to help you maintain your business just like any other business would. And that's kind of the perspective that I come at this with, and the way I explain it to, you know, some of my old banking friends is it's just like any other business, right? They have a team, they have, you know, financial officers, they have accountants, they have everyone else. They just have kind of whatever that stigma is federally about being in a cannabis related business, but they have the exact same business needs and they deserve this exact same, you know, service and products.
Yeah. And, you know, I like to kind of talk about how you guys even came into specializing into an industry such as cannabis. I think it's important when you're building rapport and relationships with these cannabis owners that they also feel like there is a sense of priority in saying, yes, you do see us, you care about our industry, and you care about sharing these medicines, because that's really what that is. So Megan, if you'd like to kind of talk on that point.
Yeah, sure. So I think, like so many people, I kind of fell into cannabis. You know, nobody, I've talked to very few people that are like, I was destined to go. And maybe I was destined with my name, but so I fell into it with an opportunity years ago of a colleague that we had worked together at a previous firm and became the CFO at a cannabis company, and hired me to take over their audit. And I went in and it was a very unique experience because I was able to, like, hey, full disclosure, I don't know anything about cannabis. Like, and he was like, that's fine. And he was so great at that. He taught me a lot of those things. And it opened that platform to be able to ask questions, because everyone's always scared of that, right? You never want to show your cards that, oh, I don't know what that means. And cannabis is like one of those industries where there's acronyms left and right and people are saying stuff and you're like, what are they talking about? So it was a really welcoming environment for me. And I fell in love with it immediately. I just fell in love with the culture of it, the different clients that I started to meet, and just the community nature of it, just much more laid back. And I just really thought it was pretty interesting. And for an accountant, right, there's not too much that it gets exciting about accounting. But it was also an opportunity to get in on a industry that was kind of new and up and coming. And there's not too many times in our careers where we can say that we have that opportunity. So I kind of took it and ran with it. And then just last year joined Withum in their cannabis niche practice, because they just do such a significant amount of work and have such a deep bench. So, and now all I do is cannabis. It's 100%.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting industry, a lot to learn, but definitely manageable. And again, we stand as advocates. So there's also some passion behind it, at least from myself. And it sounds like you as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Rebecca, Danielle, did you guys want to chime in on that?
Yeah, so pretty similar to Megan, I fell into it. Right. No, like I said, I feel like exactly the same way. A lot of people that I meet, it's something happened in their life where it's just that's where their path kind of led them, and that's what happened to me. So, leaving a financial institution that I was a little unhappy at, and finding First Citizens Bank and getting here with these colleagues that I have now in this position, and finding out that they were hemp friendly, and they were kind of just like, you know what, you should be our hemp specialist. And I was like, I don't know what that is, but okay. But getting into it and like embracing it with open arms. It's like what everyone has been saying. This is the industry itself, the people that are in it, the business owners. It's very much like Megan said. It's like I'll meet with one person or like go for coffee with them or something, and then we're like, we like each other. We're gonna do business with each other, and it's very much like that. And then being a part of Cannabis Lab is really great too, learning so much from everyone. And just kind of being welcomed with open arms, because again, we just kind of like landed into it. But I've learned so much, and it's actually a really fun industry to be a part of. So I like being able to say that, hey, I work at a hemp-friendly bank, and being out and about and going to these conventions and fighting for it and advocating for all of these clients. So it's been really fun. It's been great.
It is fun. I took kind of a progressive tumble here. I didn't fall, but it was like kind of a, I left Discover after being there for 6 years, and and you've kind of done the same thing, right? You've kind of exhausted compliance advisory or risk assessment with kind of in the banking, within banks. And so I went to a banking as a service provider, working with fintechs, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. And I was their compliance director, and I was like, this is just a different way, right, to take all of that experience and that education from all of these years, and that was exciting. And then I met some folks from Paybotic, and it was kind of like a really convenient, like, oh, we liked each other, right? Like, do that over here. Like I could do that for you. I could help, kind of bring that, all of that experience to what you're trying to do. And I'm having a ton of fun. I have met some of the best people, people who are really interested in doing a good thing for a community that's kind of been like over in the corner a little bit, like we don't really touch them. And it's like, no, let's do everything we can, right, to give them the exact same treatment, the exact same services that any other business would need. And because compliance and risk are so important to helping them get those services and retain them, I feel I take it very seriously, but at the same time, I'm having a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, we're happy to have you on board in the cannabis industry, all of you ladies. We actually have 2 comments inside the Q&A. So we have Joyce, her comment was, cannabis is all about compliance, and we need banks to help normalize this industry like any other business. In Mass, there are so many more options now than there were in 2018. We appreciate your hard work in banking. So I think that's almost reassuring on what we're doing. We're really helping these businesses. And we have Kevin, he said, so there are many growers, dispensaries who don't want legalization to expand for certain reasons. What cannabis companies, MSOs, dispensaries, grows are wanting federal legalization for the benefit of banking? I don't know if we could single out companies who do not want federal legalization for the banking industry, but we could definitely talk about our experience and how we see that as a trend, maybe.
Everything I'm hearing is that they want federal legalization. They just want the opportunity, right? To have that kind of diversification of being able to choose in the market what type of banking you want, right?
Oh, he actually did another comment. He said, I'm asking what type of companies, not individual brands.
Yeah. I haven't heard any that don't want it, right? Like I said, they really want that choice in the marketplace to say, I want to bank with this bank or not that bank, right? Versus saying I kind of have this really small, set of banks or financial, providers that I can choose from. And again, as I read and learn more, really what a lot of them want is to get away from having all of that cash intensive business, having a lot of that cash on hand within their businesses, and just kind of the risk that's surrounded with having that. So I haven't heard, at least in the 6 months that I've been in cannabis banking, that there are any who really don't want it.
Yeah, I haven't heard any that are vocal about not wanting it per se. I think it's a double-edged sword, like anything that, with federal legalization, there's going to be a lot of benefits, but we're going to see some new challenges, right? Everybody talks about federalize it legally, so 280E goes away. 280E is probably not going away. It will just be called something different. So no longer is it 280E. It's called an excise tax. There's just going to be changes as it's going to continue to evolve. We're going to have opening of the state lines, and that's going to create its own challenges because, up here in New England, is it going to be the best thing to be growing cannabis anymore versus out in California where you can do it year round? So it's gonna have a lot of challenges. So there's pros and cons to it. I haven't specifically heard of like an MSO versus a single retailer saying yay or nay to it, but I think that there's pros and cons to each side, and you could give benefits to each one.
Sorry, I was just reading the chat. We have John who asked if any of us are cannabis consumers. I've been in banking for over 10 years and any substance use is frowned upon. It sounds like all of you has fell into cannabis banking. Thank you, John, for that. I would like to say, yes, I'm an advocate. I am a consumer. And I like to think that I advocate for professionals in the industry saying, yes, I am a consumer, but yes, I have my professional hat on and I'm a great accountant. And I'm sure that these ladies could say the same on their profession.
Yeah, and I think this goes back to Danielle's point earlier. It's the stigma with cannabis, and that's just going to take time to evolve. And I think banking is one of those old school traditional type industries, where you still have those stigmas around it. But to me, I mean, so many people that I know, having cannabis at the end of the day versus a glass of wine or a beer is no different. But it's just the stigma of what people believe. And I think the walls are starting to come down. But I think it's going to take some time.
It just takes education, to remove that stigma. And I do feel like there is power of saying, I'm an advocate, I'm a consumer, and I'm also a professional in this space that you could rely on. So just educating that this is what this looks like. That's how we get closer to that.
Absolutely. I think advocacy, whether you're an individual user or someone, I advocate for the choice for anyone who needs it and wants to use it in a responsible manner, right? We have a very close family member who has cerebral palsy who does use it very regularly on a prescription basis, and it helps him quite a bit. So it would be, I would be very hard pressed to say, that the stigma around medicinal or even recreational use of cannabis should be any, more taboo than alcohol or tobacco, when I can actually see with my eyes very regularly how beneficial it is to him.
We have John who also asked, he's curious about how cannabis companies, specifically plant touching, keep their money now. I'm hearing that there's a lot of businesses that are keeping vaults, which sounds like a huge risk. Thank you for that question, John.
So besides people asking if it's at my real name, and do I get free samples? The other most common question that I get is, what do they do with all their money? Because I think people have this like stereotype that there's just like stacks and stacks of cash everywhere. Yes, they have vaults, but typically they're not keeping large sums in the vaults. They're transporting it through an armored truck to their banking relationship, you know, their local bank every day or two, they're doing pickups. But it is a highly, it's a cash business. So at the end of the day, you could have a significant amount of cash, which is, you know, I've seen in different planning and zoning meetings here, you know, this is what people's gripe is, you know, that it's going to create more crime and, you know, with the cash business. But I will say, you know, these companies, if you've ever gone to one, I mean, the security systems and the video footage, you know, you're on video everywhere you go. The cash controls that I've seen are incredible. You know, I have a client who, if their tail is off at the end of the day by more than $5, they're rewinding the footage and they're going to find that $5 of where it went. So yes, there are vaults, but no, not all of their money is in a vault. It is just a temporary, really holding spot until it gets transported into their bank.
And there are some amazing firms out there who are very specific in doing like risk assessment and, you know, providing services around the safety and the security of dispensaries and cultivators, and making sure that all of that is very tightly controlled for, you know, to make sure that it's not a security and a safety risk in a neighborhood or for the individuals who work there. So it's, yeah, you're right. Maybe if it seems like, you know, to the lay person, it's kind of a loosey-goosey, there's stacks of cash sitting around, but I am learning that it is very well controlled. There's a lot of risk and security involved.
Rebecca, did you want to add on?
Yeah, everything that these lovely ladies already touched upon. It's kind of like I don't know, a lot of people really, I hear that all the time. They'll say like there's stacks and stacks of cash that they're keeping on hand, but there is a process to it. You know, like Danielle was saying, a lot of them, they do have cash pickup services, you know, with Brinks, Loomis, whatever it is, where, you know, at the end of the week or whatever their desired pickup day is, that cash is being removed. So it's not like they're really not keeping as much as a lot of people think they are, is really essentially what it is. There is a process in place, and it is protected. So it's not just, they're not hiding it like under their mattress either most of the time. I hear that a lot too, that people think that they're like hiding it under the mattress at home. And I'm like, they have a better process in place most of them.
Yes. Well, thank you ladies so much for being on this panel. It was a pleasure moderating. Do you guys have any closeout statements before we have our cutoff time?
I just want to say thank you for having me. This is my very first one of these since I've been in cannabis banking. And as usual, I'm meeting some very awesome people, some super professional individuals. There's a lot of love and a lot of passion here in this business. So thank you for including me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. I think, you know, having panels like this with people from all different parts of the country, all different backgrounds, just really help continue to reduce the stigma around cannabis and who's actually working in cannabis and what the industry really is.
Yeah, I agree. I'm happy that I was able to join and be on this panelist. I think it was a really great conversation amongst all of us, and it's been really great. I'm glad I was able to.
Guys. Yeah, sorry about that, Rebecca. I know that I've actually received like 10 messages in the chat. So I'd like the audience and the attendees to message these women directly. They're on LinkedIn. We have Megan, Danielle, we have Rebecca. So reach them directly if you have these questions, and I know they'll be more than happy to help. So thank you again. And let's thank C-Lab for giving us this platform to share our knowledge.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.